Good morning, everybody, and welcome back into building Hyrule Castle in Lego Week 3, where we finally settled on a scale and a design, and I am proud to bring you what is, by so far, my favourite part of this build, without doubt. And if you haven't recognised it already, these are the docks from Breath of the Wild Hyrule Castle, with a couple of elements. Obviously, there's still more to do. I'm missing a wall because I want to try a technique, and we'll deal with that next week. But not only am I going to show this off to you in all of its glory today, but I'm also going to bring you into my planning document and explain to you why this new idea is foolproof. The biggest change from the previous 2 weeks we've had is that we're now on a base plate system. We're using 32 by 32s, and then we're using the Ninjago City water technique. Now, this is something I didn't actually do in the other one. Originally, there was going to be no water, but we're just using black plates underneath for now, as this is pretty deep water. Maybe we'll have to change this up around this area where it's shallower in the future. But at the moment, we've got our black plates underneath, followed by our transparent water tiles. Then, if we go, I guess, with the way out of the water, you've got this small, shallow step network that goes up here, which brings us up to our main dock floor. We're using lots of the dark bluish grey masonry, as well as a couple of broken up bits, as while we are still doing a pre-calamity castle, it is very clear that the docks is more of an industrial, slightly worn down area. Definitely going to have some crates and stuff around here, but this brings us around to our first, docks area. So, we have our little dock that comes up here. It's built up on round cylinders, and it hangs up above the water ever so slightly. You've got some cheese slopes for a little handrail, and it's a little 6x6 platform where you can do some fishing. Over here, we actually have the little bridge segment that goes across, and it's using a variety of pieces, some of which would be printed wooden pieces, and some of these would be the log print that you know appears in some sets. And we cross across to this second dock, just how it appears in-game. We also have an exact copy of the dock here, just with different wooden pieces in different shades, as well as some more roughed up edges that go round to the corner where the docks ends. If you notice over here, though, we have this little patterned platform here, and you might be wondering what this is. Well, this is still under construction. This is this big rocky pillar that pokes up to the sky in the docks. I'm going to put a reference image on the screen, and I'm still working on how to construct it because I don't know how tall this is going, so I don't know where it needs to shrink into, but we'll deal with that in next week's. Over here, we have the two drainage arches, and what I've done is I've put a olive green brick behind them, and that is to sort of simulate sludge or something. We've got this little rocky outcrop in the middle here, which is slightly the wrong scale, but I think it works nicely, and it also conceals the imperfect nature of Lego arches. I think this area looks pretty nice, looks exactly like how it should do, and above it is, of course, all of the light bluish-grey accents to the dark bluish-grey masonry bricks, which are obviously what makes up the majority of the castle in this area. These go up to the balustrade, which is using the quintuplet pieces on the tops here, which are in the wrong colour for now. We've also got this little worn down gap before a stack of 1x1 plates to represent the patterning on the balustrade, which you actually see in the docks. So it's sort of representing the imagery, and then you've got the highlight area, then the back and the depth. So I think that's a really nice technique to sort of give some character to this balustrade. We'll leave the right hand side for a little bit longer while we talk about this area here. Obviously, just like the real docks, we have a slightly less steep staircase using jumper plates to offset each step, which then brings us up to this balustrade area up here, which is obviously being supported by these supports. One thing I'd definitely like to explain today about this Hyrule Castle build is we're going to be using bright pink, because it's not a colour that's going to appear particularly often in the castle, to represent non-applicable colours in bricklaying. For those of you who don't know, when it eventually comes time to buying this castle, these bricks here aren't going to be on show, therefore they can literally be any colour, meaning I can save a lot of money rather than trying to buy dark bluish grey everything. They can be red, green, and I've been very careful to make sure that none of them are visible from any angles. You may be going, but wait, Octane, this is visible. But don't you worry about that, because there will be another base plate with a continuation of the dock butting up against it and hiding it here. It's all been thought through, and I'll be showing that any minute now in the planning segment. We've also done some more of our rock work, and I talked about this in week 1 with the other design. I'm not a fan of how much of a right angle this is here, but it's fairly accurate. Basically, we're just using a variety of different slopes to create a really unique texture, and while some may consider it a bit of a boring rock work technique, I think it definitely fits with the style of the polygonal art style of video games and the Hyrule Castle in general. However, if we continue to the right, we have the way up to the Great Flame Blade, which will be on this base plate here, which I'm really excited to try and do, and obviously the way outside of the docks if you're familiar with Breath of the Wild. We have this small incline which is all rocky and done, and I definitely want to try and texture this up using a variety of slopes and studs and the light bluish grey colour as well, and it definitely brings us up to the height that we need to. I'm definitely fairly pleased with that. And we've also been using this tool element here to represent like the chains that are in the walls. This is a common feature of some of the underground rooms like the West Passage, the Lockup, and the docks area, where there are these rings which would have had chains attached to them, and this is definitely the best Lego piece to represent them. They were used as hands on Big Ben, but they've also appear as like, I don't even know what to call it, utensil toolbox wrench, according to Bricklink. Now, if we move around the back once again, you can see more of this pink area. I'm not going to fill in every gap because it's just impossible to tell what's a structural flaw in Studio. Even the stability function in Studio, I don't particularly trust. However, if we move back over to the right segment, which is what we're going to be mainly focusing on next week, we can see that I had my first challenge, which was to do a 45-degree angle on this build, and I think it came out great. In the end, I settled for, instead of using hinges, to use one of these pieces here, this like wedge element, and that just sits in nicely there, which allows me to offset the entire castle. And again, I used another one up the top, hidden up here. Now, these elements are grey here for a reason, and that is because if you're unlucky, you could technically see them through a gap here, although it's very, very hard to do. It's this element right here, because if that was pink, you definitely see it. So that's another reason for using the colour pink. Either way, it's a fairly flush join, at least by Lego standards, which continues up into the archway segment up to where the shrine would be in Breath of the Wild. So what I've done here is I've built my wall on my 45-degree angle using the exact same techniques, and all of these lines and such are fairly close matches for what you see in the actual game as per the reference imagery I'm showing you. I've also built up this archway. I haven't dealt with the cliff wall here, although I have done the staircase behind, as well as put the 2 torch brackets in. I designed this technique so that I could attach like a what would you call it, almost like a column topper around the masonry bricks here, and all it is using the offset on a 1x3 tile to create almost a cube around the tiles. We also are using some snot work here to just create the more accurate patterning for what we see in the game, as well as using some 1x8 arches on an offset jumper plate just so that they actually sit in the middle and aren't excessively big. Now, I haven't actually got to the shrine platform yet. However, I have continued my balustrade technique along here, as it is the same pattern in game, and I've also worked out the angling for like the platform, because obviously it sits out like a big hexagon, although those ours are definitely bigger than the hexagon plates visible in game. I've also done my best to replicate the patterning of the light greyish accents on this segment, and I'm looking forward to seeing how they compare when the other 2 sides are complete. I've also done my best to replicate a Hyrule banner, and while it's a bit big, I definitely think this could be some room for improvement. We're replicating using the 3 colours, and I'm going to change out these for dark red now that these pieces are available. There are definitely some splicing of masonry, but I really don't think they're overpowered or look too similar. The docks are definitely a grungy area. However, before we move over to our planning, I definitely want to talk about what we're going to do next week. Really excited to try this flame blade and stuff, but I've definitely got to prioritize getting the rest of the docks segment done, or at least where you can walk in the docks, and that will really start to fill in and show you the scale for this castle model. As it stands, this is already 2 modulars across by 1 modular deep, because it's on 2 32x32s, and I'm really, really excited to see how this goes. I really hope that this is the final design. Either way, let's go over to the planning, and then we'll wrap up this part of building Hyrule Castle in Lego. Right, cool, and here we are over in PowerPoint when I've been doing my planning, and this may look very, very confusing, but this is all based around one idea, and that is where the dock is. So the plates I showed you today are what I'm calling plate A0 and B0, and they match up with this interior map of the castle, which I have here, about where the docks are. They are right behind here, and in fact you can even see it if I scroll up here. This blue rectangle where I'm hovering represents where the entrance to the docks is. So with some tricky maths and stuff, I've worked out that our docks sits on A and B so far here. From here I was able to triangulate these squares, and therefore that means that each red square is a base plate. And let's just say it's quite a lot of base plates. At its biggest dimension, it's 9 base plates across by 8 base plates deep, and that should cover the entire castle. However, it could end up being bigger, I really don't know. Either way, so we've done A and B, and C will also include portions of the docks. What I've done is I've also labelled the outside ones as exteriors because they're not full base plates, so we're yet to see how we do them. And I would like to sort of spiral out from here. ideally I'd want to cover all the way up across this middle row here, up to P0 before I start working up to the second level. However, we're definitely going to do some trials with covering up the docks just to make sure it works. But this back area is definitely the way to start, more so because there's a lot less elevation changes than this mess down here. We'll get to the front of the castle later. I'm also particularly excited to do the Sanctum, and I still want to try and include that piece from week 2, the top of the castle, which you should still go and check out in this MOC if I can. Either way, I hope you can appreciate this is a lot of work, which is why it's taken me so long to like decide on a design. But I'm super pumped on this project right now, and I'm going to be pumping it out on the channel every other Monday. For the time being, I hope you guys are enjoying it too. Let me know what you guys thought of the docks, as well as what details from the Hyrule Castle interior you'd like to see, because obviously there are a lot of them and they're sort of important. So I think that would definitely be an interesting thing to discuss. But either way, consider subscribing if you're enjoying this series, and next week we will get the docs all finished up and hopefully have some more to show you. I'll see you next time.